Hey folks, so this is actually episode 16 coming up. In the episode I say 15, and I'm just clearing that up for any confusion. Thanks for listening so far to anybody out there. And this episode is part of a series I'm doing. So it's the art of coaching. So it's for other coaches and just for other people to get an idea of what it's like to work with an online coach. And speaking of working with a coach, so I do online health coaching myself. And with the new year coming up and people setting New Year's resolutions, I'm taking on new clients. So for anybody looking to get started on the right foot for the new year coming up, I'm taking on clients. So get in contact, DM me, and we can set up a consultation. Without further ado, here comes episode 16, and I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to episode 15 of the Progression Health Podcast. I'm here with Dean McAloon. Dean, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey Ross, thank you for having me on. I'll give you a little bit of an elevator pitch for anyone that doesn't know me. So I am an online nutritionist working for Triage Method out of Ireland. My background, I suppose, I was a personal trainer for 2 years. I'm in the industry about 5 years. And 3 years ago, then I went and done my nutrition qualification, became a nutritionist, started working online with people mostly. And then in July there, I started working with Triage. So we're kind of like an online coaching company. There's 6 of us on the team. We have a number of different specialities. We also do personal trainer and coach education, as well as we have a member site for all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I work in the nutrition department with my colleague Brian Hingisa. I think he was on your podcast recently. And I suppose our specialities would be people that are looking to improve body composition, so fat loss, muscle gain, people looking to improve their relationship with food and their body image, and then also athletes as well. So we would work with CrossFitters, we would work with GAA athletes, footballers, combat sport athletes, that type of thing. And then obviously we work with general health, habit formation, and anything really surrounding the realms of nutrition. That's kind of what we do. But those 3 are the main categories that we kind of work with. And what we're known for, I suppose, as well, is the body composition, relationship with food, and the athletic performance kind of stuff. But yeah, so I'm from Monaghan originally, County Monaghan, but I'm living in Dublin at the moment. So I'm just waiting for Tony Houlihan to lock us down again and make me want to move back to Monaghan. But we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, no, that's kind of my origin story for now. But yeah, happy to be here and have a good chat with you.
Brilliant, yeah. So you do a lot of work with Triage. What's kind of the main difference, I suppose, from pre to post Triage in terms of like what's the kind of the service like?
Yeah, so I suppose like first of all, you have the team aspect of it, right? Because me and Brian are nutritionists. Shane's actually recently become a nutritionist as well. Gary is a physio, and he's going on to be a medical doctor. Nicola is a medical doctor. Paddy is a wizard when it comes to biochemistry and everything in those kind of realms. So I suppose a big aspect of it is that if there is a client that is potentially more suited to the expertise of one of the other coaches, we can get advice from each other, or we can either switch that particular client over to a more suitable coach. So there's that element of it. It's a lot more expansive. Whereas, when I was on my own doing this, it was kind of, I was left to my own devices in a sense, right? And then I suppose you just have the lads have really nice systems in place. And we obviously have the members hub, as I say, which is a kind of a conglomeration of videos on all different topics. We have a section for clients with regards to their training, nutrition, and lifestyle habits. And then we have a different section on the member site for coaches, which is more in-depth knowledge of the fundamentals of exercise and health and nutrition. So it's nice to have all these different resources available to you. But in terms of the fundamental coaching that I do, it hasn't really changed. I would like to think that I have maybe improved slightly, hopefully, as a coach. which is what I'm always trying to do. But fundamentally, the process of developing strong relationships with my clients and getting them really good results, that has stayed largely the same. But for sure, it's really nice to be part of a team, because when you're doing online coaching by yourself, it can be a bit of a lonely endeavor, shall we say.
Yeah, that sense of community is massive, especially in kind of like the digital age we're in, where a lot of people are working from home. So then in terms of, we talked off air a little bit about like community and the importance of that. Let's say you have people listening who are like, they're not really fully aware of the importance of community or the benefits you can get from it. What do you think are some of like, the biggest changes someone would notice going the health and fitness route alone as a client versus with, all the different types of communities that are out there?
So can you just reword that? Sorry, is it kind of like, are you asking about the difference between going to the gym solo versus maybe joining a community like CrossFit kind of thing?
Something along those lines. Yeah. The different types of, strongman, powerlifting,
Sure.
classes.
Yeah. So I suppose my window into this is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because that's what I do. But as we were talking off air, we were talking about strongman, powerlifting, CrossFit. And I definitely think that if you can integrate your exercise into a community and have that social element to it, it's going to be, number one, much easier for you to form the habit of going to the gym and getting your training in. The training is way more enjoyable, and you're also building relationships as well. I think in the time of COVID, we have all become very much aware of the importance of human connection. I think when you're locked in your house, you can't meet anybody, you potentially can't see your family, you potentially can't see your friends. It was grand for about 10 days. And then we all decided, or then we all came to the realization that this is shite. Sorry, maybe I can't curse on your podcast.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
But, I think the human connection and the social element of exercise is massive, because like I know lads down at the gym, that train jiu-jitsu, and like they're there every single night. And, one of my really good friends, like some of his best friends that he has now, the connections were formed in that gym whenever he was training with them. And I would imagine that it's the same for people that do CrossFit, for people that are in the powerlifting community. One of the triage coaches, Shane, is a powerlifter. The powerlifting community seems to be a very close knit as well. I have another friend that, as we're saying to you off air, he's a strongman coach. And, like he's literally built a new business and a new gym and a whole bunch of new connections and a whole community just based off strongman training. So it is absolutely massive. Like, and as we were saying, like, I actually do enjoy going to the gym by myself sometimes, where I can just sort of throw the headphones on and get to work. But I think for the average person, if you can bring that sort of social element to your training and make exercise a lot more fun, even if like, I know this, what we've talked about is kind of martial arts and resistance training, but even like running clubs, and tennis, football, this is kind of why the GAA is obviously, the GAA, sorry, is so big as well, because it has that social community element, and it's a lot more than just doing a bit of exercise, and that can be very powerful, I think.
Yeah, it can become more than just exercise. It can take on a whole new life. Do you have any
absolutely
sort of examples you can think of where that really came through for you? Like sort of, I don't know, maybe your motivation was low, or you had an injury, or, you just for whatever reason, you weren't feeling like doing some exercise, and the community aspect kind of like, really paid off and sort of helped you to stay consistent with your training.
Yeah, so I suppose like if I even think back to when I started going to the gym, which is nearly 10 years ago now, like I wouldn't have had the confidence to go to the gym by myself. So it was actually my friend that I said that he's recently opened the gym, and he does all the strongman style training and the competitions. I actually would go with him. And he was a lot bigger and stronger than me, still is. So Danny, if you're listening to this, but I would go with him, and that's obviously just one person, but he was always there to push me, and he showed me how to train hard, and we always had good chats. And like even to this day, like I would go to the gym with one of my mates to lift, and then obviously I do jiu-jitsu then, which is obviously a very there's a big social aspect to that. And I know like because like I've been training for so long, and I do enjoy the training, and I love the benefits from training. I do think that I would probably not be as inclined to train on certain days if I had to go by myself all the time. Like I think, going back to what I was saying earlier about being in lockdown, I think one of the reasons that a lot of us didn't enjoy the home workouts was because it was like, I'm doing this by myself. It's in the hall or in the utility room or whatever it is. It's boring. The atmosphere is not there. There's all these elements of it that were previously a big part of it and made the experience more enjoyable and more attractive to do, and weren't there anymore. And that's a big part of forming a habit, is making the behavior more attractive for you to engage in. So if a lot of those check marks are not there, you're less likely to engage in it for sure. Like, and I only have the benefit that I've been doing training and exercise for so long that I treat it like brushing my teeth. I'm going to train, even if I'm if I'm on an island where there's no gyms or anything like that, I'm still probably going to be doing push-ups and pull-ups and going for runs and stuff like that, just because I've been doing it that long that it's such a strong habit. But for anyone that's sort of trying to get into it more, if you can sort of have those extra elements, as we say, is the social element, going to classes with people, or going to the gym with a friend, or going running with someone, or whatever it is, anything to make the habit and the formation of a new habit more attractive for you is going to be so much easier for you whenever you're trying to develop that kind of routine.
Yeah, habit change or forming new habits is like really difficult. I think people, they kind of underestimate how challenging it is. And, it sounds like a nightmare, the lockdown where you're in the utility room, limited equipment, no community, like you couldn't have any more barriers to that habit change. So the community, just like you mentioned there, is like huge. It can really pull you along. Even someone asking you're going for a session, you're kind of like, oh, you're feeling a bit guilty. Like if you say no, and you'll enjoy it. So it can go a long way. So yeah, with your coach, you spoke there about like, trying to consistently learn and improve. Is there anything that you've learned recently and that you kind of have picked up on over the last couple of months?
In terms of coaching or anything in particular like that?
Yeah. So I guess since you started with triage, or maybe over the lockdown, any kind of updates you've made to your coaching service?
Yeah, I suppose like I've been kind of skimming over and almost relearning certain aspects. I suppose the coaching psychology stuff has been something that I've been skimming over again. So going over things like motivational interviewing, and I suppose the general communication skills that you develop when you're talking to clients, because I think for me as a coach, as we discussed kind of off air as well, developing that connection and having a strong sense of communication with your client is so important for them to get the results, and also for you to be able to coach them properly. I think when it comes to the majority of clients that I've had, if I can get a strong connection, if I can create a good line of communication with my clients, then the chances of having fantastic results is dramatically improved. I think the handful of times that maybe I've had lackluster results with clients over the years has mostly been down to a breakdown of communication for whatever reason. As we said, maybe it's not the right time for that person to do coaching, or maybe the personalities didn't click or whatever it is. But when it comes to coaching, for me, communication is key, because I said earlier, like with triage, it's great to have the resources. The systems in place are really nice. You have the members hub. You have the other coaches to ask questions and potentially brainstorm things with. But I think when it comes down to getting great results with clients, it's about having good conversations with them, asking them good questions. This is kind of some of the tenets of motivational interviewing, is not preaching at them, not telling them what to do, but more so listening to them and trying to open up a line of communication with them that allows them to be honest with you, and makes them feel comfortable. Because I think if you can create a comfortable environment with a client, and if you can ask them questions that they feel happy to answer, and sort of, because sometimes, as I'm sure you'll know, Ross, like when you're working with clients, it can be sometimes difficult to get the answers that you want, because maybe they're a little bit vague, or they're unclear with certain things. And a lot of that just comes down to asking the right questions. And as I say, creating that environment where they feel comfortable being honest with you. And I think constantly working on those coaching skills, making the process client-centered. So John Berardi, he's the creator of Precision Nutrition. He talks about making the process client-centered and not coach-centered. So while you might be, in quotation marks, we might be the experts, right? At the end of the day, it's the person that you're coaching that is engaging in the habits and eating the food and doing the exercise and drinking the water and doing all these different types of things. They're the ones that's doing this at the end of the day. So you need to make it about them. You need to make sure that it's really all about them. And the analogy that I use is that when it comes to dealing with clients, I'm just a satellite navigator. You're the one driving the car, and if I can improve my abilities as a satellite navigator, if I can learn the maps on the road better, and that's obviously part of that is learning the theory and the science. Another part of that is learning how to deal with different personalities. Another part of that is, again, developing those communication skills, asking the right questions, reflecting back at the clients, making sure that they know that they're in a comfortable environment and that they can be honest with me, and that I'm not going to berate them or tell them that they should be doing this and they should be doing that, and that they're, if they eat a bar of chocolate, flying off the handle or anything like this, which a lot of people think some coaches are like that. If we can avoid those kinds of things and focus on, as I say, becoming a better satellite navigator, learning the maps and working with the client on that, the results are going to be so much better. And I think that's one of the big things that I'm constantly working on, because when it comes to the theory and the science, the biochemistry and all that kind of stuff, that's really important, right? But I actually don't, there's a certain point, unless you're really working with elite athletes, there's a certain point where you sort of get to diminishing returns with the theory type stuff. And, it then becomes more of a case of, right, how can you communicate this properly? How can you get these ideas across to your clients so that they click, and that the client goes away from a session or an email or a consultation and says, that makes so much sense to me. That really fits into my life, what I'm trying to do. I know exactly how I can go from point A, where I am right now, to point B, which is the goal that I'm trying to achieve, or the habit that I'm trying to form. And I'm really happy with that, and I'm really satisfied with that. And that's super, super clear. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get better at all the time, because, sure, learning all sorts of biochemical pathways, I find that interesting. I find that cool. I'm sure you do to a certain degree. Do clients care about that? Not really. Not really. I think they care more about how you can get them from that point A to point B. And to me, that's all about communication skills and the coaching psychology and learning how to get those ideas into the client's brain and mindset so that it clicks, and then they can go way off even when you're not there and do the thing that they're supposed to do to make their life better.
Yeah, communication skills. I think the older I get, the more I see that it's like, you know, the cost of miscommunication, or just the value you can have by being a good communicator, or just having, I feel as though even just sort of in a more vague way, it's like just good, like personal kind of like human connection skills in a broader sense, you know, like knowing when to communicate and when not are invaluable. And yeah, one of those techniques is motivational interviewing. Can you just talk a little bit about that and explain how it's kind of helped you with your coaching? I know you already touched on it a little bit, but just in a bit more detail, because I feel it's kind of like a newer, relatively new technique to personal training. I know it's been around for a while though.
Sure. So motivational interviewing is it's a counseling style developed by Rolnick, and I can't remember there's two guys mainly that were kind of the big proponents of it. Rolnick was one of them. I can't think of the other guy's name. It's slipping my mind at the moment. But essentially, motivational interviewing, and I suppose what's called the spirit of motivational interviewing, is grounded in a lot of what I said there. So developing that environment where the client feels comfortable, and developing a certain amount of empathy with the client, having acceptance of the client. That's really, really important, because I know in my past, in my time as a personal trainer, I would have had this very rigid mindset where I'm the personal trainer and I know more than you, and you're here because I am the person that can get you to where you want you to be. You want this information from me, and I am the authority, and right? And that does work for some people, but most of the time, and the scientific literature actually backs this up, most of the time it doesn't work. I think instead, you need to have this environment with the client where it's a sort of a level playing ground, right? You accept them for the type of person that they are, no matter what, right? Because motivational interviewing, it was initially brought up and developed for use with addictions. So people with drug addictions and alcohol addictions, and these more, I suppose you would say, extreme psychological illnesses, shall we say, or impairments to one's life, more so than general habit formation and optimization of health, although it does fit beautifully into this realms because of kind of the spirit of motivational interviewing, which as I say is about that empathy and creating that environment where the client feels like they are worthy, I suppose, is a big one. The client feels accepted and that they feel comfortable. So I suppose whenever I am having a discussion with a client, that environment and that spirit of motivational interviewing is very, very important. And it's always kind of at the top of my mind, because I said earlier about being a satellite navigator, that's kind of a big part of motivational interviewing. Now, there are 3 different styles that you can kind of go in. You can have a following style, a guiding style, or a directing style. So a following style is kind of more where you're just following the client. You're not really doing much. You're just sort of letting them sort of take control of the situation. The directing style is kind of more where you are kind of telling them what to do a little bit more. But most of the time, that guiding style, which is somewhere in between, is typically where a lot of clients are going to have most of the benefits. And this is especially important for clients that are maybe a little bit unsure about change, because when it comes to, say, for example, athletes, that directing style that I said about motivational interview, or where you're kind of more just telling them the information and just giving them the facts and saying, right, this is what I think you should do. Now you should go and do it. That works better with athletes, because athletes are there. They want to know exactly what to do, because it's like, if I do X, it's going to result in Y improvements to my performance, right? But for someone that's maybe a little bit more I'm not sure about this. I'm confused. I don't know what's going on. They're a little bit ambivalent to changing their behavior. This is kind of where that guiding style of motivational interviewing becomes really important, because I often find that, as I said earlier, when it comes to the theory and stuff like that, that's all nice and fancy. But when we take, for example, like eating better, right? Most people know how to do that already. They don't need to tell me about the polyphenolic content of broccoli and all this kind of stuff, right? That's not necessary information for them. They already have the answers. They just need to be guided in a direction and be set up in an environment and a dialogue created where they feel comfortable speaking about these topics, so that it moves them towards change. And that's kind of, as I say, that empathetic, where you accept them for who they are, and you're very open and curious about the whole process with them. That's kind of the spirit of motivational interviewing, and that's what sort of guides the client to almost talk through the answers and talk through the change with you, because they already kind of have them in them, right? You're kind of like a mirror sometimes. You're just sort of reflecting back and sort of, as I say, as the satellite navigator, guiding them towards the answers that they kind of already have within them already. So that's kind of, I suppose it's a bit of a summary of motivational interviewing. There's a lot more to it, but that's kind of how I would think about it in my mind. And kind of some of the things whenever I'm communicating with a client that is maybe a little bit unsure about change, on how to move them from, okay, I'm not really sure about this, to, okay, let's take action on this habit and let's start making some changes in my life that's going to be positive.
Moving from ambivalence to the change they want to make anyway. That's kind of the short. It's interesting to hear someone else talk about it, and I'm like, yeah, how can I, think of it in my own words? And that's just the short answer. And yeah, I'm thinking you're really touching on like kind of psychology and mental health here as well. And then also, I feel as though it's one thing to talk about a technique like MI, but it's another thing to actually kind of see it or to use it. So kind of out of curiosity, would you feel comfortable doing a quick little dialogue around MI? So I'm thinking of doing, so my ambivalence, for example, is I'm thinking of doing like a half marathon, but I'm dragging my heels. And Dean, you're the coach. Would you feel comfortable doing a quick little MI dialogue?
Sure. Let's run with it.
Cool. So yeah, I want to do a half marathon, but Thanksgiving's coming up, Christmas is coming up,
Okay. So the doing this marathon is important for you in some capacity. Can you tell me a little bit more about why that might be? What's some of your motivations for doing this marathon?
Absolutely, yeah. So, as a fellow coach like yourself, Dean, I know health and fitness isn't just the resistance training or, for example, like jiu-jitsu or running. It's, it's all around. So even though I'm training in the gym regularly, I think it's good to have cardiovascular fitness as well. So I'll have a more all-around base of fitness if I train up to doing the half marathon. But I guess because I'm in the gym so often, it's a big change to go and run consistently. It's kind of like I'm like a fish out of water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I suppose you value the cardiovascular benefits from the marathon, and you see that doing that would be beneficial for you overall. And you're the type of person that values their health, and you want to do this, but at the same time, you're also seeing that there are some obstacles in your way with regards to Thanksgiving, as you said, and some of the other challenges around that. What can you think of any ideas yourself that might help you overcome some of these challenges? Have you got any plans potentially in place? I have some ideas myself, but I'd love to hear yours first before we kind of move forward.
Yeah, so my knowledge of health and fitness is like, I'd like to think I'm pretty flexible. So like, even though it's a half marathon, anything that improves my cardiovascular fitness, be it running, be it even, for example, yoga that improves my like mobility or anything at all, will benefit the half marathon, especially as we talked about like habit formation. So, I like basketball, and basketball will improve my cardiovascular fitness. So keeping a flexible approach to my weekly kind of, total cardiovascular volume, we'll call it. And then also starting small. So like, I hope to run, I think it's 13 miles, but I don't have to run 13 miles in week one. I can run, I could run 3-4 times and do 13 miles in week one, for example, or maybe less, maybe more, and then build up over time. So a small plan would just be like starting small, really,
Mm, mm. I think that's a great idea. I think you have a plan in place. Kind of what is required, and your knowledge on the topic is really, really good. I potentially have a couple of points for you if you're interested in hearing them.
Sure, yeah. As in, I haven't actually put the foot down to get going on it. So any feedback would be cool.
Sure. So I think what you said was really good. As we've mentioned, this is obviously important for you. You're the type of person that values your health, and you want to see those cardiovascular benefits. But I think what happens sometimes whenever we are trying to form new habits is we go a little bit too hard, too fast, too quick, and especially with regards to marathon training and running in general, it can be difficult sometimes to build up to it. And often, as I say, people jump into the waters a little bit too quickly, and they end up with pains in their ankles and their knees. So what could potentially be a good idea would be to slowly incorporating some of these miles into your week, just where you feel, right, okay, that's certainly a time in the week that I could see myself running 5 miles, right? And plan that ahead, potentially put it into your diary, maybe incorporate it into your existing training schedule, and see how you go. And if you can do that once or twice a week, say to yourself, right, okay, that was a good week. And then review the situation at the end of every week and potentially start to add on more miles or more sessions until you feel comfortable with the pace. So what's your thoughts on that as an idea in terms of implementing some more cardio and running style training into your schedule?
It honestly sounds very reasonable. When you break it down like that and just set kind of like the barrier to entry very low, it's like, yeah, I can do that, but I just have to modify the workload to where I'm currently at. So yeah, I feel as though nothing to it but to do it now. We finish this call, I'll be running out the door.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, that's great. And then I feel as though you're talking about the psychology aspect of your coaching, and you had a post about male mental health, and I think that's very important. I think people are talking about mental health more, but I don't think we talk about it enough, and I think talking is the foundation to kind of good mental health, whether it be as we talked about off air, with relationships with like someone you trust, or even I know you do a little bit of journaling as well, so it could be with yourself, or could you talk a little bit about that post and just the importance of mental health?
So I have the book here, ACT Daily Journal. So I find that journaling is a great exercise because it's self-directed therapy in a sense. Because what is therapy at its core? It's essentially you're talking through things with an individual that is, as we said earlier, with the motivational interviewing, guiding you through the process. Now, the thing about it is, therapy is neither cheap nor readily available. And that was kind of that post that you're talking about. That was with Jamie, right? We're just talking, part of that podcast, we were just talking about the lack of resources, the lack of mental health resources specifically available to people in Ireland. And he's from Northern Ireland, which is in the UK. So the issue is there as well. And I think for the average Joe, or someone that's maybe not in a lot of pain when it comes to a mental illness, if you are, say, for example, somebody that just wants to keep in good mental health, or potentially you're dealing with a little bit of negative emotions, or you're you're going through a tough time or something like that. You're not very, very deep into a mental illness where you would need that extra care from a psychologist or a psychotherapist or a doctor, whatever it may be, or you don't need pharmacological interventions from SSRIs or anything like this. If you're just somebody that's looking to keep mental health good, or if you are potentially in a negative place and you want to try and get yourself out of it, journaling is a fantastic exercise that you can do because it's cheap and it's, as I say, it's like you're doing therapy on yourself in a sense by writing things on a journal. The only concession I would have about journaling is because it's fine, but if you're just writing what you're thinking on a piece of paper, that's good up until a certain point. And I find that using an ACT daily journal or something that's guiding you through your thinking, to me, is a lot more effective. So ACT is another evidence-based therapy technique or style of therapy. So it's acceptance and commitment therapy. And I've been using this journal, and Brian has been using the journal as well. I got him one as well because it's from another podcast. I know we're talking about loads of different podcasts on your podcast, but it's from Psychologists Off the Clock, which is a podcast for psychologists who are running it. And I was listening to it one day and I picked up the journal because I thought that sounds really, really interesting, because ACT as a therapy is evidence-based and it's very effective. And as I was saying earlier, it's great because every week you go through a different aspect of ACT, and we'll not talk about that too much because, well, number one, it's not my area of expertise, but it's also a big topic as well. It's probably a podcast for another day. But each week you go through an aspect of ACT, and ACT is essentially one of the biggest tenets of it is you're trying to develop psychological flexibility in your mindset. So that is where you are essentially becoming more flexible around the way you approach your thoughts and your emotions and consequently your behavior. And the ACT Daily Journal helps you with this because there's 6 different components typically of psychological flexibility. And each week you work on and you journal and you essentially write down about one element of psychological flexibility. So using diffusion as an example is one aspect. So this is where you're kind of diffusing from negative thoughts and emotions, because when it comes to issues with our mental health and problems with negative thoughts and negative emotions, what often happens is we get fused to them. You know, it's almost like we can't, they've almost like got their claws kind of hooked. These thoughts and these emotions have their claws hooked into us, and we're fused to them. And it's very difficult often for us to create distance from these thoughts. And diffusion is essentially a technique in ACT where you are engaging in exercise that allows you to see thoughts and emotions for what they are. They're just thoughts and emotions. They actually have no bearing on reality, unless, of course, you let them have bearing on reality, unless, of course, you let them intrude into your life and affect you and stop you from living a good life, in a sense, right? So some of the techniques maybe for, as an example, you have a negative thought, say, I'm fat, I'm useless, I'm stupid, I'm not a nice person, nobody's going to love me, right? So these are all kind of thoughts that we might have. What you do is you might write that thought down and you'd examine it. And then on another page, you would write the thought backwards with your non-dominant hand, right? And what this essentially does is it essentially allows you to look at the thought and almost bring this sort of silliness into it. You know, look at how silly that thought is. You wrote it backwards. Like, that's stupid, right? Or another one might be you imagine the thought on a television screen inside a sitcom like The Simpsons, or the Friends, or a TV show like The Simpsons, where Homer is, say, for example, he's like shouting the thought at you. It's like, oh, you're so stupid, you're so fat, you know, nobody likes you. And it's like it sort of makes a bit of a joke of it and sort of allows you to diffuse from the thought and see it for what it is. It's just a thought. It doesn't actually have any bearing on reality. And oftentimes they are silly and they are oftentimes exaggerated as well, because we do, as humans, tend to live in the extremes of things. And this is obviously a problem whenever we sort of become fused to these thoughts. So essentially, that's just an exercise, one of many, many different exercises in this book, in this journal, that allows you to take a step back, look at your thoughts and emotions, journal about them a little bit, create that distance, and develop these psychological tools in your psychological toolbox to regulate your emotions and regulate your thoughts so that you're not too caught up in them, and allows you to bring your mindset and your mental health to a place where you feel a little bit more comfortable. And while ACT is not about, and ACT and I suppose therapy and psychotherapy as a whole, as far as I understand it from a nutritionist perspective, by the way, is it's not about locking up negative emotions and thoughts about yourself. It's not about that at all. It's about, as we said earlier when we were talking about motivational interviewing, accepting them. We're going to have these negative thoughts. They're part of life. They're actually an important mechanism in our survival. Whenever we think back to our ancestors, having anxiety about something probably saved our ancestors from getting eaten by a lion or killed by a warring tribe or an oppositional tribe or whatever it may be. Having anxiety and having some of these negative emotions were survival mechanisms. And that was great back then. But now in our modern society, they're starting to work against us a little bit. So having these tools like journaling, or having these techniques that we can take from ACT or CBT or whatever type of school of therapy that you're taking things from, having these tools in our toolbox can be very, very useful. And I think it's important for not just people that are struggling with mental illness, but also it's also something that people that are just, normal people in a sense, or people that are not necessarily dealing with mental illness. Sorry, I shouldn't say normal people, but people that are sort of just wanting to keep their mental health in a good place. I think it's important for us to do this work because, as I say, life is all about troughs and valleys. There's going to be ups and downs, and having these tools in your toolbox and having these techniques is very, very important. And I think it can be a real game changer for you, and it has been for me definitely. As I sort of go through this strange experience that we call life, and go on this quest for just leading as best a life as possible, and trying to achieve a version of ourselves that we would be, that our family will hopefully remember, in a proud and happy sense.
Absolutely, no doubt you are. And thinking of people's kind of health journey and tying it back into maybe someone who's listening, or just elaborating a little bit more, it's like, why would being able to accept things and commit to things be useful for someone's like physical health? It's great to, have a nice kind of clear head, and a clear frame of mind. But what would you notice with maybe your eating patterns, nutrition, exercise patterns, and your physical activity by prioritizing your mental health in the ways you've talked about, and then maybe learning a little bit about ACT?
Sure. So I suppose it's all connected, really. A lot of people think that physical health is divorced from the psychological, and that's absolutely not true. I think one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is a lot of the issues that we have in modern day, even things like pain. A lot of people that are kind of in the therapies, the physical therapy sphere, will kind of think, right, if I just give you this corrective exercise, your pain will be fixed. And that's very one-dimensional, I think Gary would be the person that you should talk about this more, but this is my understanding of it, in that pain is a lot more than just what's happening from a biological, physical stance. It's actually, the biopsychosocial model is actually what's going to be a lot more conducive to the treatment of pain, as an example. But kind of back to your question, in terms of I feel that the working on your mental health and keeping it in a good place has to be integrated with all the rest of your other health habits. Because let's say, for example, earlier we were talking about what motivates you to go to the gym or exercise. And we were talking about that community element of it. So we're talking that's a social element, right, of this biopsychosocial model. That's social, right? So if we were to take that away, then maybe you stop going to the gym. And then maybe there's a lot of health detriments that come along with that because you're not exercising, you're not doing your resistance training, you're not doing your cardio. And then maybe you're the type of person, which I'm sure you've seen before, that there is a type of person that if they don't exercise, they're like, well, if I'm not exercising, what's the point of me eating? Well, sure, no point. I'll just start eating junk food again. And then maybe that leads to them staying up really late and getting poor sleep quality. So it kind of goes into this sort of structure where everything is connected, right? And again, another example would be, let's say, for example, I don't do this kind of work where I'm keeping my mental health in a good place and a stressful event happens to me, something that makes it very difficult for me to regulate my emotions and my thoughts. And maybe I get so caught up in my emotions and I'm ruminating on all these thoughts and I'm sort of having this really negative experience, so much so that I just sort of retract and become this social recluse where I never leave my house. I stop going to the gym. I only eat takeaways. I don't meet anybody. And it sort of comes this perfect storm of negativity that started from the aspect of this stressful event happened to me and I wasn't able to regulate my emotions. And then that caused me to sort of retract into myself and stop going to the gym, stop meeting people, stop eating well, and it sort of snowballed in a negative sense, because I'm a big believer in momentum. I think if you can build momentum positively, if you can start sleeping better, it becomes a lot easier for you to eat better and exercise. And, it's all connected in a sense, but the opposite is true as well. If you let that momentum build too much the other way because of, say, a negative stressful event, it can sort of leave you down a path where your overall health is affected. And this all started from a psychological problem, So that's why I think this stuff is important. And that's how I think of it in terms of how it relates to our physical health habits. So hopefully that answered your question.
It's like a domino, or just a kind of maybe like I don't know, I don't want to kind of pathologize it, but like, it's kind of like a deck of cards, tower of cards or Jenga or something. If you take out the mental health block, the whole foundation, and it is the foundation, like, so it could be very shaky. And if a stressful event comes along, it could be setting you back a lot and losing a lot of momentum. And momentum is huge as well. You kind of get like almost doing things automatically, where things seem easy, and that's a great place to be in. And tying it back into your kind of most of your work now, like kind of pivoting a little bit, your nutrition work. And another post you had was about protein, and it's crazy that the longer you're in the industry, the more it becomes ingrained in it that protein's important. But for whatever reason, there's kind of like a disconnect with the general population. So your post was about like 5 ways to get in more protein. What can you tell us about that and the importance of protein? And especially, I think, as we age, the importance of protein.
Yeah. So I suppose, like, if we take a look at the RDA for protein, which is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, that is, a lot of people sort of like think of that and say, right, okay, I'm getting enough protein. But the RDA, the recommended daily allowance, is simply the limit that they set so that the RDA is more so, think of it this way, right? If you go below the RDA, bad things start to happen to you, right? Physical detriments to your body will start to rear their ugly head in a sense, right? So that's really just like, you need at least 0.8 grams of grams protein per kilogram body weight. Going below that, that's where you problems start to occur. So that's not the RDA is not health optimization, right? To me, and to anyone that cares about building muscle and generally keeping their body healthy, I would be more inclined to go towards double the RDA at least, right? 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And that's kind of like, I generally don't go below that, only in very particular circumstances, potentially with athletes, something like that. They need to reduce their protein intake for specific reasons. But when it comes to getting enough protein, like there's obviously muscle mass, muscle maintenance, muscle development. And as you said, it's important for the elderly population as they age, they need protein as well. So protein is important for that. There's so many biochemical processes in your body that require protein, so if you're not getting enough, you're going to be leaving yourself potentially in an immunocompromised position. So getting enough protein is a big part of keeping your immune system where it needs to be. And even just for your hair and your skin and your nails, you need protein. So protein is really important for a lot of things. But I think, especially as you said there about for people as they get a little bit older. So one of my good friends, Richie Kerwin, he is doing his PhD in sarcopenia. So sarcopenia is where, as you age, you start to lose muscle mass. This is a major problem for people as they age, because if you lose muscle mass, you lose muscle strength. It opens up more of an opportunity for you to get hip fractures and stuff like that. And the unfortunate reality of it is for elderly people, what happens sometimes is, and I've actually seen this in my local community, and it's in the research as well, of course, that people, an older person, potentially they lose muscle function, muscle loss, they have a fall, they fracture their hip, they go into hospital, and they get a bug and it kills them, right? And this is all stemmed from you didn't have enough muscle, right? So protein is really, really important for everyone at every age, right? But especially that elderly population. I think it is really, really important. I think if I don't know if you've had Richie on before, but you have had Richie on, have you?
Yeah, yes. He was on earlier. Yeah.
Brilliant. So I don't need to go into that anymore, because he is much smarter than me and he knows a lot more about that, because it's his area of expertise. But yeah, like I suppose the key takeaway from it is protein is really, really important, not just for muscle mass development, which is kind of what people think. It's like protein bodybuilders, Arnold Schwarzenegger, which it is, of course, and I love building muscle as much as anybody else, as much as any other 26-year-old male. But there is a lot more to protein than just that. And I think it is important to consider the fact that the RDA is really just the limit that you should not go under in terms of negative detriments to your health becoming apparent. And that's kind of why, like, we always talk about like getting enough protein in terms of a heuristic that you can follow. So a framework that you can follow in terms of structuring your nutrition is to think about protein first. So if you're making a meal, protein first, and then some sort of plants added to that, vegetables, fruit, etc. Because I think that's where kind of people get a little bit bogged down in ideas on how to increase their protein intake. Because a lot of people don't know what foods are high in protein, or maybe they've heard that you shouldn't eat this or you shouldn't eat that, because a lot of the foods that are high in protein, eggs, dairy, meat, they come along with a lot of myths surrounding them, because people think I can't eat dairy because inflammation, I can't eat eggs because cholesterol, I can't eat meat because heart disease, so it's like, whereas some of these other foods are a little bit more, people are like, right, I think everyone apart from the carnivore community can agree that vegetables are pretty damn good for us. So this is kind of where people get bogged down in getting enough protein. But that's why I think, I made that post about getting more protein and 5 ways to get more protein in your diet, because it is really, really important. And I think the more ideas that you have around developing recipes that are high in protein or easy ways to get protein in. And as we were talking about earlier, making the habit easy and attractive to engage in. The less barriers you have to entry for this, the easier it is for you to be able to include this into your overall diet and thus get the benefits from it, from both a health but also from a muscle function and performance perspective as well.
Having a plan when it comes to protein goes a long way. And I like that one. Protein first when you're having a meal. So absolutely. In terms of plans, I know fat loss is a big goal of a lot of people with the current state of health in general population. But you had another post about what about after the fat loss diet? So let's say someone goes on a fat loss diet and they're like, right, they're stopping, whether it would be good or bad or what, whatever way it went. Can you talk to us a little bit about after a dieting period and a plan you can put in place?
Sure. So I think, you see these transformations on Instagram and, they're great. People do these 12-week fat loss phases. And I'm not one of these coaches that say 6-week fat loss challenges are useless. I don't take that stance on them. I think that if they're executed well and there's good habits built into a program like that, there is absolutely utility for them. And I think they can be very, very good to get someone started. But the key there is it's just a start, right? And I think the problem is what happens is people will do a fat loss phase and they might, restrict a lot of things in their diet, alcohol and sweets and all these different types of things. And they're in fat loss mode for 6, 8, 12, 16 weeks, whatever it is. They get the result. They might get the transformation picture. They might get a pat on the back from their coach, say, well done. You've done exactly as I say. And then what happens is they're like, right, what do I do next? And then it's like, they don't have anything to think about. They go from fat loss switch in their brain is now off. What happens is, because that goal of losing fat can be so motivating and so intrinsically motivating because you're seeing the results quite quickly. What happens is that switch goes off in their brain and they start to return to their old habits. Maybe they stop doing as much exercise or cardio or steps or whatever it is. Maybe they start including a little bit more processed food in their diet. Maybe they're just not as interested in the process. And for a certain type of person, that might actually be good, because if they're implementing a very restrictive approach, they're maybe doing an enormous amount of steps or cardio, or they've massively restricted their diet. It might actually be a good thing for them to get back to a more balanced, inclusive type of approach. But I think for someone that really cares about body composition and wants to avoid this kind of rebound when it comes to the post-fat loss phase, I think it's important to set exciting goals straight away, right? Because, as I said, fat loss is intrinsically motivating. And if you get to the end of a fat loss phase and you don't have any other continual goals, then it's very easy for you to return to some old habits, potentially, that leads you again to putting a lot of the weight back on, a lot of the fat back on that you may not want on. Some fat will be gained after a fat loss phase, even if you go back to maintenance calories and do it correctly. But I think first thing you should do is, right, what's next? Do I have a fitness goal? Do I have a muscle building goal? I think oftentimes people that care about their body composition should also care about developing some level of muscularity as well. So if you're a beginner intermediate, if you've done a fat loss phase successfully and you're kind of happy with your endpoint, then it's logical to think, right, okay, then you must have a body composition goal overall. One side of the coin is fat loss, but the other side of the coin is muscle building and muscularity. So if you get to the end of the fat loss phase, immediately, or even before the fat loss phase is done, have a discussion with your coach, if you have one, about, right, I want to do a muscle building phase. How can I do this? And I think when you have that goal set, and you have, even if it's a cardio goal, even if it's not a muscle building goal, if it's a fitness goal, a marathon, Ironman, whatever it is, make sure you're setting things up next. What's the next thing? Because If you don't, you sort of leave yourself in this valley of disappointment or despair, or not knowing really what to do next. And it's important to set that goal, that the next thing essentially, to keep you moving, to keep you motivated, to keep you engaged in the process of developing good, healthy habits, healthy nutrition, exercise, etc. Right. So that's, I suppose, from a more abstract goal setting, psychological end of things. Next thing then is actually, right, what do you do with your nutrition? And I don't really like reverse dieting. I think it elongates a process that's already done and dusted. So reverse dieting, for anyone that doesn't know, is if you have been dieting for a certain amount of time and you kind of get to, you've been eating low calories, maybe you started on 2,500 and now you're down at like 1,600 calories or something like that at the end of the fat loss phase. Reverse dieting is where you would basically tack on 150 to 200 calories every week, and you're sort of building yourself back up to the 2,500 maintenance. Whereas I'm not a fan of that, because you're still kind of dieting, and it's just like, right, prolong this issue. I think it's better for the vast majority of people, unless they really like reverse dieting and they find it useful, is to just throw them back up to maintenance as quickly as possible. Now, another important to note is your maintenance when you started your fat loss phase is not the same as your maintenance whenever you ended your fat loss phase, because you have something that's called metabolic adaptation that occurs, where your metabolism is essentially adapted to the lower calories that you've been consuming. Now, it will come back to itself as you sort of go back up in weight. Your metabolism will upregulate in a sense, but essentially you need to sort of take that into account. It might be 10 or 15% of your maintenance from when you started. So bring your calories back up to maintenance as quickly as possible. The reason that I do this is because you want the performance benefits, you want the benefits to your energy levels. If you're at the end of a fat loss phase, you're probably going to be dealing with more hunger. You're probably going to be dealing with more cravings. You're probably, as I say, low on energy. Your sex drive might be lower. So you want to get all these things back to where they should be as quickly as possible. And that's why I kind of think reverse dieting, I'm not a big fan of it, because you want to sort of rebound back to a place of health as quickly as you possibly can. And then you'd be monitoring your weight over the course of 2 or 3 weeks, so that you're not overdoing it or potentially underdoing it. Because I know some people, it can be difficult for them to unhook from calorie deficit and being in a fat loss phase. And then you would stay there for a little while and sort of maintain things and let your glycogen stores fill up and sort of enjoy the benefits of eating more calories again while also being lean. And then you would start to progress into your muscle building phase or your marathon or whatever it is that you've set as your goal next. So that's kind of from an abstract sense in terms of goal setting, and then also from the sense of what you actually do with your diet and your calories after the fat loss phase. Now that's kind of I've been talking there for 5 minutes. There's a lot more that goes into it than that, but that's kind of the starting point that I look for in terms of the post fat loss phase period. So hopefully that was helpful in some capacity.
I love the what's next thought, because there's no destination really. Like, you might lose 5 pounds, 10 pounds and think you've arrived, but you never arrive. It's your health is constantly a journey. So that's a really useful way to look at it and say, what's next? So final question quickly. I know we're conscious of time. So coming up to the holiday period, I know it's common that people gain weight over Thanksgiving and over Christmas, notorious for that. What do you think of the idea of people setting out the goal to maintain their weight across this time? Do you think it's realistic? Do you think it's reasonable? Would you have any counter goals or ideas?
This is a really nice segue from your previous question with fat loss. So, as I say, there's going to be a certain amount of weight gain that's going to occur after you're finished with the fat loss phase. This is normal. And I would actually think, I would make the argument that this is good for a lot of people. And you shouldn't get annoyed if this happens to you, a certain amount. Obviously, if you lose 20 pounds and you regain 18, then that's probably not, maybe you've overdone it a little bit there. But a little bit of weight gain is inevitable and is important for getting your body functioning again properly, right? Because your body doesn't want to be super lean, right? I've had this discussion recently with a few friends, or one friend in particular, and I said to him, the big thing that I said to him was, being very lean is it's like going on holidays. You just visit it. You're only visiting that place, right? You do not spend your life there, right? Because if you do, you're going to be very, very miserable. So how this relates then to the holiday period, if you look at across a year, most people have a weight that they kind of cycle up and down from, right? So there's going to be a spike at holidays like Christmas because there's more eating and drinking and stuff like that. And then a lot of people will try and take it off whenever it comes to New Year's and stuff like that. But I think it's not a good idea to try. It's definitely not a good idea to try and lose fat over Christmas, because that's just, you know, you're really making the experience very, very challenging for yourself because the food environment is so different, right? But I think outside of that, we should accept the fact that weight gain will occur to some degree. Yes, you can do some damage control. And I think that you shouldn't take the stance in a similar way. You shouldn't just take the stance that I'm just going to eat junk food for the entirety of December and not do any exercise. I think if you really care about your health and you have that as one of your values, you should still absolutely be training as much as you like and as much as you feel is beneficial to you. Like I train on Christmas Day. Last Christmas, I did jiu-jitsu with one of my friends on Christmas Day, and it was great because it was a really nice way to set up the day where, you know, obviously you're going to be drinking and eating a lot more after that. But, you know, I suppose it's about taking that middle ground, where you accept the fact that weight gain is going to occur and that you shouldn't deny yourself of the full enjoyment of Christmas and of the festivities. Again, the psychological and the social element of Christmas and enjoying the experience with your family. You can't deny yourself that. Like, that's outrageous to be doing that in the pursuit of a fat loss goal, right? But at the same token, if you value your health and your body composition and all this, just when you see December 1st, don't go mad. Or even if it's, you know, some people generally have a kind of a week or a 10-day period in or around Christmas where they kind of start to let things loosen up a little bit. But still kind of keep in mind that, right, I don't want to have an enormous amount of work for myself whenever it comes to January, but I do want to still enjoy Christmas. And this is kind of where this middle ground comes in, where you sort of accept the fact that weight gain is going to occur, but you can do many different things by, again, keeping your exercise habits up as long as possible. I'm not going absolutely crazy whenever it comes to Christmas in terms of alcohol and sweets and all this different types of things, because me and Brian we did a podcast on holidays, and what we said, a key message from that was, this was for a son holiday, by the way, it wasn't for Christmas. But the drink and the sweets, when you come back from your holidays, it's still going to be there, right? It's still, in January, they're not going to go away. It's still going to be there. So you don't have to go mad at Christmas just because it's Christmas, right? Finding that nice sweet spot where you're not depriving yourself of the experience. You're not trying to lose fat on Christmas or anything like this, but you're also conscious of the fact that I don't want to have too much work for myself in terms of putting on an enormous amount of fat in January. If that is something that you care about and you feel is helpful to you, and you don't care about it too much. But then, as I say, it's finding that sweet spot essentially, where it's like you're getting the best of both worlds. You accept the fact that weight gain is going to occur. You're still engaging in your health habits as much as possible, but you're enjoying the experience of Christmas, the food, the festivities, the time with family, etc., etc. You know, and that's kind of where I sort of look at it. And then whenever January comes, all good. We're kind of back to maybe being a little bit more diligent with our health habits, maybe doing a little bit more exercise, being a little bit more, including a little bit less processed food and alcohol in the diet. If you feel like, right, okay, I've added an extra 3 or 4 pounds of fat from the festivities. So that's the way I look at it for most of my clients, you know.
I really like that. It's as though you're accepting the Christmas period is going to be a different time for your nutrition, but you commit to still, you know, applying a bit of moderation, and you're being flexible as well. You're not being rigid saying, oh, it's December, you know, that means that I have to drink a lot and I have to eat a lot. It's like, no, I might drink a lot some days, but other days I might not. And yeah, that's a great point to finish on, Dean. Do you have anything you want to mention? Any projects or anything coming up in the pipeline, or just any links or place you want to show people?
Nothing in particular. I suppose if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, it's at Dean.McAloon, McAloon. You can follow us at Triage Method as well. If you're interested in online coaching, you can check out the Triage Method website. If you want to work with me, if you like what I said in the podcast, if you didn't find me totally repulsive, if you potentially wanted to do a bit of work with me, you can find the nutrition coaching section on the Triage Method website. You can work with myself or Brian, who's on your podcast recently, there. Or if you want full online coaching with Gary or Paddy or Nicola or Shane, that's on the Triage Method website as well. But yeah, no, just I suppose if you want to have a chat with me, or if you want to engage with my content, I have my own podcast, YouTube videos, all that type of stuff. Instagram is the best place. It's the epicenter for all that. Quite happy to have a chat with people. If you have any questions for me, anything with regards to anything I've talked about in this podcast, or any questions for me in general, or with regards to the content on Instagram, I'm always quite happy to answer. Shoot me a message on Instagram. And yeah, that's it. Thanks very much for having me, Ross. It was a good chat. I suppose talk for a couple of hours, but better keep it as succinct as possible.
Yeah, we'll keep it to the point, and I can attest to everything you said there. You're very, very friendly, very open to talking away. So thanks very much, and we'll chat again soon.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Ross.